Good day and welcome back to Below the Curve Gaming. So today we have another mission from ITS Season 13, which is Countermeasures. So this one is a bit different to the previous ones we've done in that there are no objectives in the way of tech coffins or communication arrays. It's HVTs and it uses the strategic objective deck with cards being flipped face up. And Ben and I will have to fight over trying to achieve those objectives as the game goes on. So one of the interesting things is that we can veto an objective, discarding it and drawing a new one. And whenever an objective is completed, we take the objective, we put it to our side, and then at the end of the turn, it's replaced. Now, in theory, you could achieve all three objectives in one turn with a bit of luck. And so the scoring is a little bit different. So at the end of the game, whoever's scored the most objectives gets 2 objective points. If we've scored the same number of objectives as each other and have scored at least 1, we get 1 point. And then you get 1 objective point for each objective you've scored up to a maximum of 8, which gives you a maximum, of course, of 10. So there's 12-inch deployment zones, there's blizzards, there's the gun turret. So this will be the first time we've used that. It's a total reaction combi rifle turret, so it's a mobile, and it has a 360 visor. There's an exclusion zone, which is 8 inches each side of the centre line, and airborne troops and troops with superior deployment cannot deploy within it. So it gives you a bit of safety. It also means that when you're on the offense, you can't start quite so far up the table. So we're keen to get into this, so we will be back in a minute. Ben rolled a crit for the Lieutenant Willpower roll, so I am deploying first and then I'm going first. I decided it would be more productive to try and get in there early and hopefully neutralise some of Ben's stuff before he could get to my HVT. So we'll be back with the armies and discussing deployment in just a moment. So here we have my military order force. It is 2 combat groups. It's 10 orders in group 1 and it's 3 orders in group 2. So first things first is our lieutenant is the Teutonic Knight. Now it's the 19-point option. So using the model with the heavy rocket launcher or missile launcher, but in this game it's just a Panzerfaust. We've got the special operative with the submachine gun, and then we've got the NCO with the Spitfire. We have a Crozier fire team of 2 Croziers just with combi rifles, 1 with an MSV2 and Spitfire. We have an order sergeant with a heavy rocket launcher. And then lastly, we have, and in this game, the Tech B is actually a machinist, and she's the fire team operative stat. So she can join, she gains Religious Trooper, and she's there to keep the Seraph alive. So we've gone for the 74-point profile, which comes with the Oxbot, comes with the Spitfire and a Nanopulsar, which is pretty good. You're a Seraph, you can afford not to take face-to-face rolls and everything. Got my little Crabot as well, just in case. We've got an Order Sergeant Hacker. Then Combat Group 2 is 2 Bulletier arm bots, both are heavy shotguns, and an Infirmary of St. Lazarus with a boarding shotgun. We've then got our 3 HVTs, so our Flight Officer, the Kraje Delegate and the Oyuroi Pilot have both been pressed into service. And we've got my gun turret, which is the Defiance gun turret model. Ben has handed me a list that suspiciously has 10 orders in it, split across 2 dubiously shaped pools. So we're assuming there's going to be quite a lot of shenanigans. He is playing Haqqislam, so it's the Ramah Taskforce as well. I'm suspecting infiltrators, possibly some form of paratrooper, but I really don't know the list well, so it'll be interesting to see what he has. So we'll be back in a second with Ben's breakdown.
Hello, this is Ben, and this is my Haqqislam force for countermeasures. This will be the first time I'm using Haqqislam in N4, and I had picked this force up originally just because I had seen it cheap on eBay, but I've added some new models to it, so it's now able to be used as a 300-point force. So I've got two combat groups using the Ramah Taskforce sectorial list. The first combat group is on the left here. I have a fireteam corps of Ghulams. So I have a Ghulam with rifle light shotgun. I have a Ghulam with missile launcher. A doctor +3. A Ghulam with a rifle and grenade launcher. And then I have the Quarry with NCO and multispectorial visor level 2 with the Mark 12. I then have a fireteam duo of Alpha Seed, and I've got both profiles, so the Alpha Seed with heavy machine gun and the Alpha Seed with the heavy rocket launcher with +1 burst. I was aware Martin was likely to be using a Seraph in this force because he had been painting it pointedly at me, and unfortunately my Mahariba Guard I haven't managed to get painted in time. So I felt that the Alpha Seed will hopefully give me something that will be able to take on the tag. Failing that, they'll certainly be able to inflict quite a lot of damage on the rest of the force. Combat Group 2 is a Fireteam Harry of Zayadins. So I have a Zayadin with boarding shotgun, which is a doctor +3. I have my lieutenant, which is a breaker rifle light shotgun profile. And then now the Hunzakut, I think it's pronounced, at the front is actually Layla Sharif. I don't own the Layla model, but I'd picked this Hunzakut up as part of the reinforcements pack from Defiance that somebody had been selling off on Facebook, and I thought it would be a good stand-in until I pick up the Dire Foes set for her. And then the final model, who will start as a camo token, is a Torag hacker with hacking device. He can start in hidden deployment, but I believe with the special exclusion zone rule that I may not be able to put him on the as a hidden deployment in that kind of area, so it's going to be limited benefit to him starting in hidden deployment is my understanding of it. I also, even without that rule, if that's not the case, I did want to start him as a camo marker. He's got mimetism -6. He'll be able to move up and hopefully complete some of the hacking classified objectives. So even if it is that he could deploy in hidden deployment, I would rather in this scenario use him as a camo marker. So that's the force. It's only 11 orders. However, with the free fire teams, it will be a lot of order efficiency, which I won't be used to with the vanilla 012 that I've been playing recently. So it's kind of maybe an overcompensation in that regard, but I did want to try some of these models out. So we'll come back with our deployment shortly and see how we get on.
So here we have the Pan-O deployment. So we have our HVT flight officer taking cover over here. We have the Karaji delegate who is looking back across the square, having stopped outside the office block. And the Oivoy pilot who's just stumbled out of a car, having managed to unfortunately lose control and potentially crash into the Kobe cow. We have our blizzard zones. 2 of them are quite far to my right. We've got one just about in the centre and one sort of blocking off the main fire lane between our 2 forces to the left. I've gone for my Bulletier fire team with the 2 heavy shotguns on my left flank, and I've got the Infirmary of St. Lazarus just beside them. To her immediate right, and people she will be hopefully keeping in the fight, is my fire team of Teutonic Knights, and currently the leader is the NCO with the Spitfire, and they've got the hacker to protect them. We've got the Seraph here, which was held back. We'll discuss why in a second. Then we've got the fire team core with the 3 Croziers, the machinist FTO, and the order sergeant with a heavy rocket launcher, who is starting the game as my fire team leader. Now, when we go round the table, we will see what Ben's got, and I'll point out a couple of things. So he's got a Ghulam fire team down here. He has got one of these super soldiers here. Now, I apologise, I don't really know the names for a lot of the Haqqislam stuff, and I would butcher them trying to say them, so you're just stuck with this for a second. We've got his Alpha Seed fire team here, including the one with a heavy rocket launcher. Because I was deploying first, I held the Seraph back because I didn't want to deploy in line of fire of it. Now that I'm going first and it's completely blocked off, if we can turn the camera to catch both the Seraph and the Alpha Seed, we can. It's completely blocked off by this big hollow tower, which will allow me to safely super jump over without taking a rocket to the face. We've got his total reaction gun turret, and it's kind of facing off against mine, which is, I believe I forgot to say, just down beside the Croziers. He also has 2 camo markers, one just here, 3 camo markers, one down here, and one over here. His HVTs, he has one here, he has one over here, and he has one down here. So depending on the mission, I intend to really push the core fire team up, which will be quite a change for me. I did discuss this very briefly in our terrain video about the need to advance core fire teams and not just use them for castling. The Seraph will lead the charge, with the Teutonic Knights backing up through the food court. The Bulletiers will scuttle up, and they're just going to really try and pin things down with heavy shotgun templates. So this is a board from Panoceania Workshop. We briefly talked about this again in a previous video. We're absolutely delighted with it. Just awaiting the top of this squiddly diddly, which is like a big resin squid. We've got the Happy Panda noodle bar. We have the office. We have the Kobe cow. This was the special starter set of the Kobe cow. It came with the tables, it came with all the fences, it came with the planters. We've got Holy Fuchs. We've got 2 of the Metro sets as well. And we have a lot of these triad signs, including ones advertising the channel. We've got some of the construction and police barriers. We bought the Squiddly Diddly table set, which is really nice. And we also bought those sort of things that you now see in fast food places where you can, the sort of terminal order points. And then just to round it off, we picked up a couple of the little resin cars. It gives a fantastic look for the table. The buildings, the tops can be lifted off, troops can move through the middle of them, which is really cool and really exciting, and we're hoping we can maybe demonstrate some of that in the game today. So we'll be back in a second for Ben to talk through his deployment.
So this is the deployment for the Ramah Taskforce. On the left flank, I have the Alpha Seed duo with the heavy machine gun up front and the heavy rocket launcher slightly further behind. The rocket launcher will start as the duo team leader. So I've got the combi rifle turret beside them. I didn't really have any good fire lines with it in the options I had in terms of placement, so I've opted for it to be slightly in cover beside them, and there is a blizzard zone that it'll have to shoot through, so it'll only get 2 shots rather than its full 3 if it's shooting through it, but it'll hopefully be able to protect my HVT beside the squiddly bin. Should say, round the corner here, I have a camo token, which is a mine, and the same round behind this entryway there as well. So they're both mines dropped by the Alpha Seeds. They're both mine layers. So then moving on, I have my fire team Harris, or Harry, which is the Zyphidans. It's a breaker rifle lieutenant who's facing backwards there. The team leader, which is a boarding shotgun doctor, and then Layla Sharif, who's the Hunzakut model there. The plan with them is to move them into the Happy Panda, through the interior, and then out the door at the other side to get into the kind of centre. And then I've got the HVT that's the Kuje delegate over there. So hopefully they'll move forward, and if they can complete any of the classified objectives, they'll be able to do it with that HVT there. Then my final models, I have the Fireteam Core, which is the Gulams, so rifle light shotgun on the left, then missile launcher at the opening, the Kawari with the Mark 12, the Doctor, and then the rifle grenade launcher. The Doctor is currently the team leader. And just ahead of them, I have the Torag Hacker camel marker at the moment. So it's infiltrated just up to the edge of the exclusion zone. I had to read over the rules and definitely wouldn't be able to deploy inside the exclusion zone with either infiltrate or the hidden deployment. So I think the camel marker is definitely the way forward with it. HVT wise, I've got Uhahu in the middle, looking at the Buddha statue. I have the my normal HVT model who's peeking in the window of the Kobe cow, and then Casanova who is ordering some food from the squiddly bin. There's the blizzard zones which are blocking quite a few of the lines of terrain. So I'll have to try and move around them. I don't have much in the way of terrain mountain in the list, and they're saturation zones, so they will block some of the shots through them. Other than that, I've got the Bulleteers on Martin's side here. So his Fireteam Harris of Teutonic Knights, his Infirmarier and an Order Sergeant Hacker beside him, his Seraph, and then his Fireteam Corps of Croziers and Order Sergeants, I believe, and a Machinist. So the plan is to see what classified objectives are flipped, move up into the kind of food court, as it were, with the core fire team, the Harris through the building, and then the duo will hopefully move forward here, but also try and take on either the core team at their side or the Seraph, depending where it decides to go. Certainly the Alpha Seed are probably my highest firepower, so I need to try and make the most of them. So we'll come back at the end of turn 1, see how things have gone.
So it's the end of the Panoceania turn 1. The classified objectives are in extremis recovery, nano espionage and mapping. Originally, I had flipped HVT kidnapping, but I wasn't confident in my ability to do this, so I dropped it for a nano espionage, which we will see in a minute turned out to be a poor plan. The Seraph started the turn using tactical awareness to super jump over the wall. This provoked air arrows from the Kawari in the archway and the Alpha Seed behind the metro. The Alpha Seed took a Spitfire round to the chest for his troubles, passed his armour save, unsurprisingly, but failed his courage roll, and so he fell back behind the metro. The poor Kawari, on the other hand, even with bioimmunity, failed by, I believe, a single point and has been dropped unconscious. The Seraph then moved forward and super jumped on top of the Kobe cow, pretty much because I could. The Crozier fire team moved up and over a couple of orders exchanged a few shots with Ben's light gun turret. Despite me knocking out the gun turret, my machinist was knocked unconscious, which was a significant blow to me, especially as Ben had taken 2 orders out of pool 2, which meant I was unable to move my doctor across to try and patch her up. the Teutonic Knight Fireteam Harry moved up, and because I hadn't banked on the fact that Ben was going to take the orders out of Pool 2, I ditched HVT kidnapping. And if we get round here, we'll notice that I've managed to get my elite infantry up to Ben's HVT, and I could have scalped the poor lass and ran off into the sunset with her. So I'm feeling like lost victory points here. But that's the end of the military orders, Panoceania turn 1. So now it's time to see exactly what the hack can do and whether leaving a tag that's not in suppressive fire on top of your local diner is in fact a safe course of action. We'll be back soon.
So it's the end of the Ramah Taskforce turn 1. I started by discarding mapping and flipping net undermine for the classified objectives. We then spent an order from Pool 1 on the Fireteam Corps, which initially tried to shoot at the Bulletiers with the missile launcher. Unfortunately, I missed, and then switched control to the Doctor, who succeeded in resurrecting the Kawari. I spent an order to move the Fireteam Harris through the Happy Panda. So they moved up through the building. They did take a couple of shots through the window, but they managed to avoid being dropped. I then moved over to the Alpha Seed duo, who started by launching a smoke grenade into the Seraph to block its line of sight, and then spent a third order at this point, 2 orders to try and smoke the Seraph, third order to move up and fire the heavy rocket launcher into the Fireteam, which took out both the Spitfire and one of the Croziers with combi rifle, dropping them dead due to the continuous damage, and knocked the other combi rifle unconscious. So the Fireteam is gone now, and it's just the heavy rocket launcher order sergeant at the back that survived. They then spent final order to move up and attempted to SMG the Teutonic Knights, who all managed to pass their dodge roll. So we have 1 beside HVT and 2 have moved up here. After this point, I moved the Harris further up and attempted to boarding shotgun the Teutonic Knights as well, but they succeeded into dodging again, and they're now in contact, one of them with the Alpha Seed with SMG. I spent my final 2 orders from Pool 2 on the Camel Marker, which moved up and then unfortunately was discovered on a 2 by an Oxbot where it needed, I think, a 2. And so he was unveiled as a Torag hacker. He has moved into contact with this piece of terrain. I was planning to use him to do net undermine because I had misremembered what I read his troop designation as. He's a specialist trained troop as opposed to an elite or a veteran. So he wasn't able to complete that classified objective. So it's moving on to the military orders turn 2. It's currently 0-0 on victory points.
So it's the end of the turn 2 for the Panoceania Military Orders, and it's been a brutal turn. The turn started with the Bulletiers moving up in an attempt to take down the Torag hacker, who's around here. And I'd switched over who was in control of the Fireteam, dropped him with the double tap from the heavy shotguns. However, in doing so, the hacker was able to isolate the Bulletier, and the other Bulletier took a missile launcher shot to the face and a Mark 12, and that was the end of that. So with the Bulletier now being isolated, I used the remaining orders from the pool, since it could no longer access them, and ran the infirmary across here, because at this point there was only 1 unconscious model, which was my machinist, so things were looking pretty good. Then the Teutonic Knights decided to try and take on the Alpha Seed in combat, and in moving up, I managed to get one of them gunned down, and this proved to be rather disastrous because it was my lieutenant. I managed to take a wound off with the NCO model, and then decided to start pouring orders into the Seraph, sending it over to take down the Fireteam Harry of Layla and her two sidekicks. This cost the Seraph a wound, but the Oxbot was on fire, or rather, the Fireteam was on fire, as he managed to heavy flamethrower all three members of the Fireteam over a couple of orders. The Seraph, on the other hand, made a massive meal of it, but eventually dropped the Kawagi. For the second time, we imagine it will be resurrected any moment now to continue his reign of terror. This provoked air arrows for the Alpha Seed, who slowly but surely elbowed down one of my Teutonic Knights, dropping him with a crit. The NCO was particularly distressed by this, and when I went to activate them again, dropped said defender. I used In Extremis Recovery on the Alpha Seed with my Lieutenant order to score me a victory point, and I also managed to net undermine with my Hacker, as once I had managed to drop the guy with the Mark 12 over here, I had a clear run up to Ben's side of the table. I thought I would finish the turn with a cunning assassination run on Ben's Alpha Seed, using my Order Sergeant with a heavy rocket launcher. Managed to crit him, was feeling really excited, and watched as Ben passed both the saves. But clearly this Alpha Seed is not made of stern stuff, as he failed his second, if not third, courage roll of the game, and has spent the time rolling across a main road. Flagrant disregard for health and safety. We also realised I totally forgot that I have a gun turret, which could have maybe done something in turn 1, but never mind. So it's the end of the turn, so I am currently 2-0 up, but it's about to be the Hack turn 2, so we'll have to see what's in store for us.
So it's the end of the Ramah Taskforce turn 2. Because Martin had scored 2 classified objectives, we had to flip more cards. We got Telemetry and Rescue, but I got rid of Telemetry and flipped Extreme Prejudice in its place. Now, I started the turn in Loss of Lieutenant, as the Zayadin with the breaker rifle had been taken out. So I only had 3 command tokens, so I didn't have enough to turn all my irregulars into regulars and still use the fire team, so I allowed it to break. I started with using the Alpha Seed, who spent his irregular order to move up. He traded some shots with the combi rifle turret, the Order Sergeant with heavy rocket launcher, and the Teutonic Knight, who dodged. I fired the HMG, 2 shots at the Teutonic Knight, 1 at each of the others. Unfortunately, I hit the combi rifle turret, which passed its armor save, took a hit from the Order Sergeant, and the Teutonic Knight succeeded as dodge. Unfortunately, due to continuous damage, I took 2 wounds and dropped unconscious, with an Order Sergeant in base contact with me, which may be a coup de grace next turn. The Doctor started by getting the Quarry up. Unfortunately, due to the lack of regular orders, I wasn't able to do anything with the Quarry, so I moved the Ghulam with the missile launcher forward, who traded a shot with the Seraph but was dropped unconscious. So I spent a command token to make another Order regular and moved the Ghulam medic up, who doctored her back up, being the 3rd or 4th model now in the game to be healed by this Doctor. So she is now back in the fight, and my final regular order, the Ghulam with rifle and light shotgun, moved into the Happy Panda and has taken up a position at the window. I then spent a command token to reforge the fire team with the medic as the fire team leader. It's currently 2-0 to Martin, or 4-0 technically, because he'll score for the completing more objectives if I don't manage to do anything on turn 3.
So it's the end of the Panoceania turn 3 and it's the end of the game. And what happened was, firstly, the Teutonic Knight used the Lieutenant Order so that I could then use Extreme Prejudice to take out the Alpha Seed to give me the third objective. So that took me up to 3 and up to 5 because I had more than Ben. I then proceeded to transfer the infirmary into the main pool because I wasn't sure how things were going to go and I didn't have the orders to get round to the machinist if I needed to, due to the bulleteer being irregular and thus obviously not contributing to the order pool. I then just threw orders at the Seraph, who moved up. The Oxbot scooted into the Happy Panda and set fire to the unfortunate Gulam inside. The Seraph just proceeded to hose the Gulam fire team, forcing Ben to declare a lot of dodges and eventually managed to drop them. It did take a missile to the face and I very luckily managed to pass all 3 saves despite the fact it was AP and explosive. And that was really the turning point, because at that point the Oxbot was then able to move up and start dropping flamer templates. It forced Ben to continuously dodge instead of just throwing dice at the Seraph. I also shrugged off hits from the Mark 12 at that point. And slowly but surely I just took down the fire team. So at the end of the game, it's 5-0 to the Panoceania. Now, I feel the game went very well from my point of view, and I also feel it really showcased our new scenery, and that's what I'm really going to talk about here. With the scenery being able to, as I will show you here, have pieces taken off, I was able to move models through the buildings, as was Ben. And this really added a new dimension to our game, because previously we would have had to have moved around these buildings, climbed on top. But Ben was able to move fire teams in, he was able to fire out of windows, cut through terrain that otherwise would have been a real block to us. It allowed me to bring my hacker through, and I felt quite cool, so I burst out the office, make a run across here. I very nearly attempted to move my Teutonic Knights through the kitchen of the Kobe cow before I realised that I didn't need to walk out into the middle of a street in front of a pair of Alpha Seed. But it really gave our game something a bit different. The garden with these, as you can see, these planters and that, allowed us like some different cover as opposed to just little barriers you've seen in other games. And these large sort of triad hollow displays really added something, because they're not nearly as big as a building, but they still provide really nice blocking terrain. Ben's hacker there actually was really, really difficult to get to. Just because of the shape of the buildings, I couldn't get a good line of fire with the bulleteers to it. And he was able to cover it well with the fire team over here. Now, it was me that set the board up. Maybe next time I'll let Ben set it up, as his last setup was a wee bit nicer than mine. Mine looked a wee bit scrappy. But I feel that this game was really improved by our terrain. And I think one of our next videos will be a review of this. We'll put a link to Antonicitas Workshop's website at the end so that you can have a look at that stuff yourself. And I would really recommend terrain like this, that's with the different footprints and the ability to move through it. So we'll be back in a minute for Ben's thoughts on the game.
So here we are at the end of the game. I just felt I would do a quick rundown on my thoughts with the Ramah Taskforce, being my first game with them as a sectorial and also my first game with Haqqislam for about 5 or 6 years. And it was quite brutal. I did obviously get quite badly beaten in terms of victory points, but I did have a really enjoyable game of it as well. As Martin says, the terrain I felt really elevated the game and offered some new tactics that we haven't necessarily been able to do so far. And I felt that moving from using the O12, which I've used in the last about maybe 4 battle reports, where they were the vanilla faction or the kind of generic faction, and there was no fire teams, my force pretty much was full fire teams in this game, in that I only had one model, which was the Torag Hacker, that wasn't part of a fire team. I felt the order efficiency of the fire teams was a real plus point. The Alpha Seeds I was really happy with. They did eventually die, but they proved to be quite a thorn in Martin's side. I did take them instead of the Magariba Guard, which I was kind of toying with which one I would use. I had the time to paint up one, but probably not all 3 models, so I kind of focused on the Alpha Seed as something a wee bit different, bit more versatile potentially, and maybe not quite as big a bullet magnet. But I felt they were quite good. I think with a slightly more open table, where some of their longer ranged weapons would be more dangerous, I think they would have done a bit more. But at the same time, they took a lot of punishment, they passed a lot of saves, and they were able to take out quite a few models, particularly the ability to pretty much delete Martin's core fire team proved to be really powerful for them. So happy with them. My core fire team, on the other hand, I didn't get as much use out of. Maybe a bit more defensive playstyle with them, predominantly just because I didn't feel I had the orders, because I used a lot of the orders on the Alpha Seeds. I didn't get to put as many orders into them as I would have liked. However, I think they were a big deterrent down the right side of the battlefield on my side, and it did kind of prove to be quite a thought for Martin to have to move towards them. So I don't think I did badly with them. They weren't the most expensive fire team. However, something I would maybe look to kind of utilise more in the future. And the Zayadin Harry or Harris with Layla, I found were pretty good. They maybe somewhat suffered from the fact that there was the back window of the Happy Panda, which I hadn't remembered when I moved him into the building, which did give Martin some line of sights, which I hadn't quite accounted for. However, I think that's one of the really cool things about the terrain, is they are a lot more open than some of the other buildings we've used in the past. So something to bear in mind for future games, but something I did forget about in this one, which I don't think I took any wounds from it, but something that I then was quite conscious of for further in the game. The only slight downside with them is I probably overextended where I moved them into the kind of Kobe Cows kind of eatery area with the wee kind of benches. I could have probably kept them back in the doorway and had a wee bit more of a defensible position with them. However, I was conscious that I wanted to start moving up and trying to score the classified objectives. In terms of the classified objectives, I had some troops that could score them. I was lacking in forward observers. For some reason, it's something I normally have a lot of in my forces, and for some reason I just didn't add any to this. I'm not sure if I just overlooked it or if the choices I took dictated model-wise or weapon-wise that there wasn't any forward observer profiles to pick from. But I think I would have at least had a choice of a Ghulam or two. So something I need to be a wee bit more wary of in the future. Final model, the Torag Hacker, I felt proved to be quite useful. I think the Mimetism -6 was beneficial. I think the choice of the camouflage marker rather than the hidden deployment was the right decision. However, perhaps having worked out that I couldn't do the nano espionage due to his troop status, if I'd twigged that first, I would have maybe used him slightly differently. So probably got a bit more use out of him if I'd realised that. So all in all, I'm quite positive about the game. Maybe not the result, but gave me some good food for thought for future matches with the Ramah Taskforce. So as always, any suggestions, any questions, please drop them in the comments below. Please like and subscribe, and thanks very much for watching.